All right, good morning, everyone. It is 9:01, and I would like to call to order the teleconference meeting of the Government Affairs and Public Information Committee on this day, Friday, December 18th, 2020. Before we begin, please be advised this meeting is being recorded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
This call is being recorded.
Thank you. Starting with Director Hernandez. Director Hernandez?
Yes,
Director Hernandez.
Director Hernandez is here. Hello.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Director Hill?
Present.
Present. Director Moylan?
Here.
Present. Vice Chair Sears?
Here.
Thank you. Chair Cochran?
Here.
Thank you. And President Parr?
Yes.
Present. Thank you. And so now you have a quorum, but you are also a committee of the whole. Also on the line, we have Directors Frederick, Garbarino, Grosboll, Maston, and Terrio.
Thank you.
I'm going to confirm staff on the line.
Oh, yes, please.
Dennis, are you here with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody.
Joe Wire, are you on the line?
Yes.
Thank you. Ava Barr, where was she here?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Thank you. Tim Manolius.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Steve
Here.
Miller? On the line. Mona Babata, are you on the line?
Present.
Thank you. Jim Swindler.
Present.
Thank you. And Kelly Hopper.
Present.
There we go. Thanks for confirming our staff.
Okay, thank you. I would like to remind everyone to mute their phones until after staff presentation and open up for director's discussion. After staff's presentation, we'll be asking for any comments and or questions on the item. If there are questions, the secretary will call on you accordingly. After the discussion portion, we will ask for any public comment. Each page of the meeting packet is numbered at the bottom right-hand corner for ease of following along. In this case, we only have 2 pages. So we will begin with our item number 3 on the agenda, which is the approval of implementation of the district's 2021 legislative platform. There is a lot of eyes on the DC right now, especially with our end of everything focused on the potential stimulus package being so close to the finish line. Outside of this funding, we have other matters to consider, and that the basis for the items before us today. The staff report begins on page 3, and General Manager Dennis Mulligan is on the line to present the report. Dennis, would you begin, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff, and members of the public. The item before you is a consideration of a legislative platform for calendar year 2021. The Bridge District is looking forward to the legislative session at both a state and federal level, and we're working with our legislative advocates as well as our fellow transit agencies and tolling agencies on a variety of pandemic and non-pandemic related issues that could potentially affect the district's operations and funding. It goes without saying that the most immediate priority is obtaining sufficient funding for COVID relief challenges facing the Bridge District and the fiscal cliff arising from the precipitous drop in travel in the corridor. We've been working on that since middle of March, and we're cautiously optimistic that we will get relief in the coming days. But that remains our number one immediate priority, and we think it'll be our immediate priority for quite some time going forward as the pandemic unfolds and as we traverse the arc of the pandemic. Over the last many years, our top priority has been to obtain full funding for the final phase of the seismic retrofit of the Golden Gate Bridge, and we want to maintain that focus. That is an existential challenge for the district if we're not successful in getting other people to pay for the majority of that cost. The size and magnitude of that project is such that it would overwhelm us otherwise, and we're continuing our efforts on that, and we look forward to working with our state and federal elected officials to bring that to fruition. Secondarily, we're always looking for money for other district initiatives, And while we're currently in a pandemic and currently things look bleak, we know that this is a temporary situation. We're heartened by the fact that the Spanish flu of 1918 was followed by the Roaring '20s. And so we anticipate that a year from now, we'll have too many passengers on our ferry boats and that we'll need to have additional service. So that one of our priorities continues to be to finalize the grant funding for another ferry boat. Another issue out there that's new in the last 9 months is that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has convened a Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force. Director Rabbit and myself had the pleasure of serving on that task force with about 3 dozen other individuals from community-based organizations, transit agencies, county congestion management agencies, and MTC commissioners. And while it's looking at transit recovery, among other things, it will explore issues of transit agency coordination, potentially consolidation and network management. Assemblymember David Chu, who's a member of the task force and shows up regularly, has stated that he anticipates introducing a spot bill in January for some legislative effort going forward. So that's something that we'll want to monitor. There's no point in weighing in on an array of hypotheticals, but once there's a firm proposal, we'll come back to the committee and seek your direction with respect to what position you may want to take on that. Specific to the upcoming legislative session, there will be a limit on the number of bills that legislators will introduce. So we're likely to see less activity than we have historically. It'll be similar to this last year, but I think they'll have a few more that they'll be allowed to move forward with. We continue to work with our partner agencies, MTC, other transit operators, the California Transit Association, the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Authority, and the California toll agencies to look for legislation that could impact how we operate our business. There is a table attached, but at the high level, COVID relief is our immediate priority. Getting money for all of our initiatives, particularly to enhance and protect the bridge for future generations with a seismic retrofit, is paramount importance. Secondarily, another ferry boat. Secondarily, getting the feds to assume responsibility for the Larkspur Ferry Channel are things that are of interest to us. There's a lot of things that we'll continue to monitor like we do every year. So we'll monitor actions that deal with state funding for transit agencies. Periodically, they revisit the formulas, and anytime they revisit formulas, it could result in a net gain or a loss for the district. So we'll monitor and we'll protect our funding sources. One new item is that the California Air Resources Board in the recent year has started to focus their attention on what they call commercial hovercraft. And ferry boats, along with tugs, barges, workboats, and a host of other vessels qualify as commercial hovercraft. And they will be issuing a draft regulation next year, and they will be hoping to finalize it by sometime next summer. Based on preliminary conversations with them, along with WIDA and others, it appears that what they're proposing as of today would necessitate that in a few years that we stop operating all of our high-speed catamarans and that we'd have to replace them. And so there's a lot at stake financially, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of potential costs. So we want to make sure that we encourage the state as they move towards a greener environment that they don't give us an unfunded mandate that makes some of our operations unsustainable. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. So we'll work with them to make sure that any new regulation comes with sufficient funding so that it can be implemented in a fashion so it's not a false hope with respect to the objectives that will be achieved. So that's something we'll be working with our advocates on, as well as WIDA and other agencies, and we'll be reporting to you on periodically. Similarly, the state has adopted a zero emission mandate for bus agencies, and we just want to make sure that there's sufficient funding in place for that, so it's not an unfunded mandate that negatively hurts our operations. There's a whole host of other things out there. We don't want to deal with a lot of hypotheticals, so we'll monitor legislation, and if anything that pops up, we'll come back to the committee. For example, if a bill were to come up that proposes sidewalk tolls or Vision Zero initiatives, that we will come back to you and report on those, so you can, at that juncture, look at what the proposed legislation is and make a determination on what position you may want. But just to reiterate, the big challenge is funding to address the fiscal cliff associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And seismic retrofit is by far our #1 priority in terms of getting money from our state and legislative partners. So with that, staff recommends that the committee approve what's before you, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mulligan. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions on these items that are listed on pages 5 and 6 of our proposed legislative platform? Madam Secretary, would you check the board members, please?
Board members, do we have any questions for Mr. Mulligan?
This is Dick. I did have a question.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Groswell.
Yeah, Dennis, do you have a sense of how much money you're asking for the seismic retrofit? I realize we need a lot of money. I'm just curious what you're thinking about. And on not as big of an issue, I'm just curious, remind us what the impact of federalizing the Larkspur Ferry Channel would have on us.
Thank you, Director Groswell. For the first question, we're looking for about $500 million for the seismic retrofit. So if we can't get other people's money to come up with that, that would put a profound amount of pressure on our finances and our operations. So that's the order of magnitude, and we've been working on it. We have a variety of strategies in place, and we're fortunate that we're the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge sells well. With respect to Larkspur, the implication is that if we were to get the feds to assume the channel as a federal channel, then the responsibility for maintaining it would become a federal obligation. Currently, about every 4 or 5 years, we dredge the 2-mile-long Larkspur Ferry Channel, as well as the turning basin and berth. The bulk of the expense is the 2-mile-long channel, and we're fortunate that thus far, for most of the dredging episodes, we've been able to get federal funds through FTA, some of our formula funds, to pay that expense with a 20% district match in tolls. If we were to federalize it, then in theory, the Corps of Engineers would be responsible for the cost of the dredging. The fact that they're responsible would not automatically mean that the money would be available. We would then have to lobby for the money, but then that would free up some of our other Federal Transit Administration formula money that we have had to use for dredging for other purposes for our bus and ferry businesses. So hopefully that answers your question.
You did. Thank you.
Yeah. Dennis, isn't the total cost of that dredging about $6 million every 4 years?
It's gone up with the passage of time. Costs have escalated, and also the disposal options have changed. Right. Up until the last dredging episode, we were fortunate that we were able to do in-bay disposal. We do a sampling and analysis plan of the sediments. We go through a regulatory process with getting permits from 5 agencies, and the material has been determined to be suitable for unconfined aquatic disposal. However, the last cycle, consistent with the broader regional planning for dredging, we had to take some of the material deep ocean disposal, which is out the Golden Gate farther than you can see with binoculars from the top of the bridge tower. So there's a lot of expense associated with that. So for many years, it was in the neighborhood of $6 million, but it has gone up in recent years.
It's gone up. Okay, thank you.
Another reason why we're interested in seeing if we could make it a federalized channel.
Right. All right. Are there any other questions by board members?
Mr. Chair, this is Director Hernandez, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sabrina.
Through the chair to Dennis, our general manager. Dennis, I realize, thank you for this list. I'm looking on page 5, and I realize that there's only so much detail you can include in this bulleted list, highlighting our general priorities. But looking at the first item, COVID-19 relief funding, one of the issues that we have come upon is our limitations in flexibility in ways that we use money that comes through. So I would just like to see the district take every opportunity to lobby for flexibility to use any funding that comes in support of operations, including our workforce. I don't know if that was part of the package and just not part of this, or part of your strategy, but just not part of this sheet. But I do think that needs to be included. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, back to Director Hernandez, you raise a good point.
Please.
The reality is, for most of the money that's out there, we have the flexibility already. What we're interested in as our higher priority is new money. Because if we use flexibility, then we don't have the money for things like dredging the ferry channel or maintaining the bridge. And so our primary purpose of legislative advocacy is to get new money to the district, and we think we'll be successful again on that. But we are always seeking flexibility, and thus far we have adequate flexibility for the current capital funds and reserves that we have.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Dennis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Are there any other questions of the board members of Dennis?
This is Director Hill. May I
Please,
speak to? Okay. So to Director Dennis. Question one is relative to this federalization of the channel. Would that affect BCDC and control of the area in that, or would BCDC continue to have authority?
That's a great question. It has no change on BCDC's authority. Currently, we're within the jurisdiction of BCDC, and they're one of the agencies that we get permits from, in addition to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, in addition to EPA and a whole host of other agencies, and the Corps of Engineers. So BCDC's jurisdiction is not changed or modified. BCDC acts as the Federal Coastal Zone Management Act agency within San Francisco Bay. So there's a federal law that under BCDC's enabling legislation and federal regulation, they fulfill the federal role there. So the federalization of a channel does not change your jurisdiction in any way.
Okay, thank you. The second thing is, and this is somewhat minor, but it was a little confusing to me. You do a wonderful job on this of giving the statement as to what these districts are. But in the case of strategy on the toll operations, you've got CTOC, and I assume that's a transit authority. What does CTOC stand for?
It's the California Toll Operators. So it's kind of like CTA for transit. CTOC is for toll agencies in California. So we coordinate that. They have a statewide group that gets together. Our auditor controller, Joe Wire, I believe, is the current chair of that group. But it's a collection of toll agencies, and we get together to review legislation and issues of mutual concern so we can all implement best practices in the state. Periodically, there's legislative proposals that come from legislators through CTOC or through other issues raised, such as for privacy or for standardization. And so it's important that we're engaged with our colleagues throughout the state. And periodically, there's things that are best practices that come forward from CTOC or from CTA. And as a general rule, we want the ability to do a Me Too letter if it's what the whole industry in the state is going along and suggesting.
Okay, thank you. And then the last item under the strategy section, on the second to the last bullet, you say protection actions that may affect state transit assistance. Is that a department or something, or is that just should that be capitalized? Let me put it that way.
It should. The state of California chooses to provide some assistance to transit agencies through two pots of money. One is called the State Transit Assistance, and the other is called TDA, the Transportation Development Account. And there's excise taxes on diesel fuel. There's sales tax on fuels that feed into these accounts, and then they get distributed throughout the state to transit operators. There's various rules and formulas that come into play. And any little tweak of those rules or formulas can change how much money we get. And so it's very important that we modify that, because we use that along with bridge tolls to subsidize our bus and ferry systems.
Okay, so it is an organization. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions?
This is John Moylan.
John.
Yeah, last month we talked about a little bit about tolls. We talked about charging pedestrians something. Has anything been done about that yet?
At this juncture, no. At this juncture, Director Moylan, no. At this juncture, what we propose in the platform is just to monitor legislation. And then if something is proposed that would affect tolling for bicycles and pedestrians on the Golden Gate Bridge or other bridges, we would come back to the committee. At this juncture, no legislation is pending. So we will monitor that. And if something comes forward, we will report back to the committee at your next monthly meeting.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Yes,
Yes.
this is Bert again. With Director Moylan's question, last month you had commented, Dennis, that you would look into CARB, perhaps not necessarily CARB, but someone who would provide the bridge, possibly a law that so that when you have pedestrians on state bridges and bicyclists, they can receive CARB money or some kind of emissions-based funding to cover the cost of it, rather than tolling as a solution.
So with respect to funding, we have a very talented grant staff led by Amy Fry, works under Joe. And Amy and her team always is out there aggressively pursuing money. At this time, there were no grant opportunities that were available for the operation of bike and pedestrian facilities, but there is for capital improvements. And so we'll continue to pursue capital improvements. But at this time, there is no pot of money for the routine operation of bike and pedestrian facilities.
I think I was asking more fundamentally, could we work legislatively so that CARB would include the kind of things within the providing they have? They certainly subsidize electric bicycles, they subsidize electric cars, and could that be included in part within the scope of what CARB should do?
Yeah, the next time they proffer regulations that deal in this arena, we will make sure we weigh in on those regulations. At this juncture, they pay for stuff. They don't pay for operating costs. And so, but we'll continue to monitor. And if we see any opportunities, certainly we always pursue opportunities for funding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, then that concludes our discussion on this item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair Cochran. We're going to pull the public line right now and ask. Thank you.
Okay.
We have one speaker. Yes,
Right.
we can go ahead and introduce our speaker.
Certainly. Good morning. We have David Pelpel who would like to speak this morning. David, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we can.
Excellent. Okay, David Pelpel, good morning. Just a couple of quick points here. On page 5, under toll operations, as I think I heard Director Hill ask, I would spell out CTOC in the first instance. I think all of the other acronyms are spelled out, so I would just add that. Also on page 5, under transportation funding, you might add or strengthen the language supporting infrastructure funding more broadly, since that sounds like it could be the first major bipartisan effort in Washington. But perhaps the language that's there is sufficient. And then on page 6, under transit operations, safety and security, you might add to the last bullet language something like support such efforts that further the district's ability to deliver its services effectively and efficiently, so that it's not just monitoring legislation regarding transit coordination, network management, and transit agency governance, but it's more supportive to the extent that those efforts, again, further the district's ability to deliver. And just finally, I support the proposed 2021 legislative platform, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pelpel. We have no further speakers.
Okay, thank you. Then, with that, Can I have a motion to approve the implementation of the District 2021 legislative platform?
Also move. This is Bert.
I second that.
And John Moylan.
Yes.
All right, Madam Secretary, would you please take the roll call?
Thank you. For item 3, to approve the implementation of the District's 2021 legislative platform, we have a first from Director Hill and a second from Director Moylan, starting with Director Arnold. Absent. Director Fredericks.
I'm not
Director
on this
Frederick?
committee.
We're a committee of the whole right now.
All right, yes.
Thank you. Director Garbarino?
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll?
Yes.
Director Hernandez?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Director Hill?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Director Maston?
Yes.
Director Moylan?
Yes.
Yes. Director Rabbit? Absent. Director Sears?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Sobel? Absent. Director Stephanie? Absent. Director Yee? Absent. Second Vice President Cochran?
Yes.
First Vice President Theriault?
Yes.
And President Parr?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public wishing to address this committee?
We'll pull it one last time before we get to the end of the agenda, so give us 1 second. We have no other speakers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, board members. That concludes the meeting of the Government Affairs and Public Information Committee. The time is 9:29, and I'll see you all in about a half an hour. Thank you.